Welcome to House Education on May 7th. The committee is looking at H 930, which is on its way to being voted out of the Senate with instances of amendments. So it'll come back to us. We're going to walk through it with Legislative Council. Would you say that going through the side-by-side might be the best way to progress?
Yeah.
Okay, then everybody on our website, you'll see a number of documents for H 930. And one being a side-by-side. As I said earlier, it's our first side-by-side of the year. So it's very exciting. With that, we'll have Legislative Council walk us through.
Thank you, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So we're going to walk through draft 3.2 of Senate Education Strike All to H 930 as passed by the House. It is on for second reading today. So I can't call it technically the Senate proposal of amendment yet. Who knows what's going to happen on the floor, but it didn't go to any other committees. So if there are no further amendments on the floor, this is what you will get in the Senate proposal of amendment. I'll share my screen. Okay, so not a ton of changes. I've tried to use highlighting judiciously so I don't get a headache. So it's to show the differences. It's a combination of phrases like no similar provision, right? So instead of highlighting all of this language in the first substantive block on the right, I've just put over on the left no similar provision. And you'll see as we get further down, there is highlighting when it's just a few words or phrases. So the Senate is proposing, or Senate Education at this point, is proposing that the First Amendment they're making to what you all passed is to add a findings section, section 1. That reads, chronic absenteeism is primarily an issue that should be addressed through preventative, restorative, and assistance-based measures designed to identify barriers to attendance and reconnect students with school. Schools should respond to chronic absenteeism through written attendance support plans, outreach to families, and appropriate academic, behavioral, and community-based supports. Truancy is distinct from chronic absenteeism. It constitutes a student's failure to comply with compulsory attendance requirements under Vermont law. Truancy should serve as a legal enforcement mechanism only after reasonable school-based interventions have been attempted and have not resulted in improved attendance. Truancy proceedings should be reserved for circumstances in which school-based interventions have not been successful and formal legal enforcement is necessary to ensure compliance with compulsory attendance laws.
So can you talk a little, to the extent that you can, talk about where these additions came from?
I believe they came from VSBA.
Okay.
Is that
It is.
okay?
Okay. And I don't have any, I have no argument with it. I just was curious, but I do just sort of wonder about findings that aren't sort of backed up. Do we I never really get involved in findings and intent, dare I say. I'm not that well versed in it. I generally assume findings are sort of stating facts as opposed to stating opinions.
So yes, so findings are really your area. I would be the person to put them into drafting format, but it is generally speaking the committee or the legislator's responsibility for providing the backup to support those findings. And in my limited experience with you all, I've seen findings kind of fall into two categories. One, where you're citing actual statistics, studies, reports, et cetera, in which case I would be asking for those reports and citations to the page and the line and all of that. And then I have seen findings that fall more generally into this category where you are kind of creating the facts, where you are you're basically creating findings that are based on the testimony that you've heard or, you know, the research that you've done through listening to testimony committee, really. So I have no report to cite to here. I don't think that that is a legal issue. It is intent language. This intent language is going, or should be guiding the model policy, should be guiding actions taken in the field. And so I think it's ultimately a policy choice for you all, how comfortable you are.
Thank you. Were you show?
It was, and I was just bumped out and now it's reconnecting. I think it was an internet issue.
Mark, while we're waiting for this to boot up, why don't you introduce yourself and give us some of the background behind the,
Mark Canning, Vermont School Board Association. So in Senate education, there was some discussion about what's the difference between absenteeism and truancy. Why is one 17.5 days, one is 20 days? What's the point of this? So we created this language just to show that the absenteeism is behavioral issue that we're hoping to have resolved with the schools. And truancy is a legal issue that you've broken the law and needs to deal with. So it could be put in the definition, but it was intended to explain what the differences are as how they're handled in different manners.
so when I read it, I sort of questioned like doing findings that aren't fact-based. I appreciated that it sort of makes it clear right at the top as to the two very distinct things that we're talking about in the bill. Do that.
I think it is fair game for you all to craft findings based on the testimony you heard. And I apparently have no internet right now. So I am not able to share my screen.
But you have it up.
I have it up.
As do we.
Yeah.
And it's available to anybody who wants to see it.
So so the second section, you'll see on the left under the House column, there's no similar provision. The Senate added some intent language. It is the intent of the General Assembly that attendance policies in Vermont schools prioritize early identification, supportive intervention, and meaningful family engagement in order to produce consistent school attendance and student success. Okay. Moving on to page 2 of the side-by-side. We are now in, and it looks like maybe my internet is back. Nope, never mind. We're now into what was passed by the House as section 1, which is the amendment to the compulsory attendance subchapter. The Senate, that's going to be section 3. I've highlighted the different section numbers. Oh no. Damn. Okay, hold on. All right. I don't know what is happening. I might be back. I'm just gonna keep talking.
Yes, that's fine.
But things keep popping up. Okay, I am back. Goodness gracious. Okay. So all I've done is cut and paste what the House did and what the Senate is proposing to do. And if there's no highlighting, it means there's no change. So you can see that the Senate made no changes to the definitions. Section 1121 is the compulsory attendance statute. Senate made no changes. Section 1122 is kind of like the second tier compulsory attendance statute, which is saying if you're on either side of the compulsory attendance age range and you are enrolled in school, then you do actually have to go. The Senate made no changes. Section 1123 is the section where you had your list of reasons a student's absence can be excused from school. And you can see this is where we're seeing the first substantive changes. The Senate removed the list and instead says that in accordance with the chronic absenteeism and truancy policy required pursuant to the next section. And then the the language is the same as the House. The superintendent of a public school or designee or the head of school of an approved independent school may excuse a student's absence for all or part of the school day, a student's absence for all or part of the school day. And then there's no list. And we're also saying, and may also request justification for an absence, which the House also has. The superintendent may request justification for an absence.
So,
But
go ahead.
I was gonna say, what the Senate essentially did here was take out all of the details here, take out the list, the reasons. And they have now, we're gonna walk through the policy section. They've now asked the policy to address the reasons and provide guidance. Good?
I'm a big fan of lists.
Okay. B was the kind of family vacation piece. And that is addressed in the next section. In that, what the Senate has done is basically say the model policy has to provide guidance for when a superintendent or head of school may excuse a student's absence for the totality of options available, whether that's family vacation, court, driving test, illness, whatever it is, right? So it's not calling out any of those specific categories. So I'm going to bump back up and walk specifically through the start of a section 1124.
That's
Good.
so we have this letter C on, and that's
C.
gone too, right? Or no?
So C,
Oh, it's just, okay.
C is we're going to scroll up
Yeah,
and is included here.
okay, thank you. I
Yep,
thought you'd
sorry.
said something about that, but I kind of missed it. Thank you.
Hard without
Yeah.
line numbers too. I couldn't just say like, we're up on this line number. Okay, so section 1124 is the model policy statute. This is brand new. Highlighting represents changes between the House and the Senate. You can see the first change here is who the Agency of Education is required to consult with in developing the model policy. The Senate has kept everything you had and added the National Association of Social Workers, Vermont chapter, the Department of States Attorneys and Sheriffs, and DCF. You had that the model policy needs to be reviewed annually, and the Senate changed that to at least every 3 years. The model policy shall, so this is where it gets a little hard to highlight. So the House version has the model policy shall include specific provisions for how to address the absence of a child with a disability. We've kept that here. It's now subdivision C in the Senate. The model policy is supposed to emphasize the importance of tailored responses to all students struggling with safety and emotional issues, and shall emphasize emotional, academic, and social support to facilitate a successful reintegration for returning students, and have protocols that respond effectively to bullying, harassment, etc. That's now captured in D in the Senate side. And what the Senate did that's different than what the House did was ask for the model policy to provide guidance for the reasons a superintendent or head of school may excuse a student's absence for all or part of the day instead of the laundry list. And
And the model policy may have a laundry list of its own.
Yep.
It sort of takes the responsibility.
Absolutely,
Us.
yes, yes, it's not in statute anymore, yep. And the model policy has to provide guidance for when a superintendent or head of school may request justification for an absence. Not a prohibition on guidance.
Yeah.
Then, the House had the policy itself, including a template for the actions taken and for the documentation. And the Senate has changed that to developing model procedures to accompany the model policy. which shall include the template for documentation and the template for standard document for documentation for actions taken, which is the truancy reporting protocol, and a template for the documentation to provide parents.
Basically taking template out of policy and putting it into procedure.
Exactly. Still required to include those templates in their work. Subsection B is the requirement that school districts adopt policies based on the model policy. The Senate made no changes there. The Senate made no changes to section 1126, which is what happens when someone starts accumulating those absences. The Senate made no changes to section 1127, notice to a truancy officer. And all of the truancy process. And the Senate made no changes, although there was some party debate over how old this statute was, in repealing the "you can't snatch a kiddo and bring them to school" statute. This has been around since the 1800s, we determined, in some form or another. And both chambers are recommending repealing it. No change to section 1129. We're out of the compulsory attendance subchapter. We're in the same attendance chapter. We're in the suspension or expulsion statute. The Senate, it's just a different section number in the Senate because they added the findings and the intent language, but they have made no changes to the House version. No changes to the implementation guidance provided as far as when model policies are due and their updates to you all. The only change is the section number. No change to the repeal of section 1076, which was the penalty to teachers and superintendents for failing to comply with the law of like $10. The only change again is to the section numbers. Both the House and the Senate require the Agency of Education on or before December 1st to submit a written report to you all with recommendations for updates to Vermont's home study program law. The Senate puts a period there. The House version provides additional guidance to what that report should include, to read to improve oversight of home study programs and to ensure home study participants' compliance with attendance requirements. So both chambers are recommending the study with recommendations for updates to the home study program law, but the Senate has removed anything about oversight and compliance with attendance requirements. And then the effective date section remains the same. Again, only the section number has changed. And that's it.
Could you talk a little bit about, in just sort of observing the work of the Senate Education Committee, at one point they had really added a lot about the home study oversight. And what I see here, I guess why remove the clause that we had in there to the extent that you could say anything about that?
So I think that ultimately the why is a question for your colleagues in the Senate. There was at one point in time, one of the drafts amending H 930. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Included language from a miscellaneous ed bill. I think it was S 166 or 167 from 2024. So in 2023, I believe, the home study program statute was amended heavily. And there was a process in law for hearings, due process hearings, if there was a challenge to a student's ability to participate in the home study program. That due process hearings process was removed when the home study program statute was amended in 2023, I believe. I do not remember the policy arguments in favor of adding the due process back in 2024, but there was a miscellaneous bill that was traveling. I think the House and the Senate had dueling miscellaneous bills. And one of those miscellaneous bills was Frankensteined and put into different places. And one of the pieces that was not put anywhere and therefore died was adding that due process hearing process back in. So there was a version of this amendment that included that due process piece. There was no consensus on including that. So it was removed from the ultimate proposal that was voted out of Senate Education. As far as the study requirements, the testimony that I observed was that the Senate's goal was to have a more open-ended report rather than limiting it to oversight of home study programs related to attendance requirements. That is what I observed in a very general sense. The policy reasons why this was the language they advanced would be better answered by your colleagues in the Senate.
You captured that very well. Other questions or concerns that anybody would like to bring up on this at the moment? Kate?
I don't love the word produce in section 2 that the Senate put in order to produce consistent school attendance and student success. It's weird.
So I will just say that we have a number of options once we get this bill. We can concur. We can do further instance of amendment, or we can go to conference committee.
Well, I don't think we need a conference committee for a word. But I just don't know that that's the word that should be it.
Josh?
Could there be a suggestion made that can be relayed to the Senate, see if they would change that before?
They're in second or third reading
Got it.
today on the floor, but I guess if anybody here would like to take up that cause with their senator, change a word, that would be fine. Period. No objection, no objection from the chair on that. Emily, did you have a question?
No, I was saying second.
I guess, go ahead, please.
No, you should answer your question first because
Good
mine is
question.
maybe on the edge of germane. I'm just curious if it's a real legal term to say you Frankensteined something.
No.
Oh, okay.
It is a term of art in my office.
Okay.
In this building.
Yes.
You know what it is?
Now, it is of course gonna be, was Frankenstein the monster or the doctor who did the work?
The doctor was Frankenstein.
Good Steve.
Sorry, we're beginning to digress.
I don't really need to straw polls right now, but I guess, is there anybody here who would be uncomfortable with concurring at this point? And nobody has to express an opinion right now anyway. Yes.
The only thing I wonder, and I am going to go with what the committee wants to do. But the only thing that I wonder is in losing the list, which I understand why you hate lists and if they're incomplete, but does that then make this always continually at the discretion of a superintendent or a school designee to make individual decisions every single time?
I think that the answer to that is the model policy will make that call. In other words, they'll sort of what's on whether to have a list or not have a list, whether whatever's on that list, if they choose to have a list, is going to be covered in the model policy rather than in statute.
Right.
That's kind of the change they made. Is they said that stuff should be part of the model policy, not part of the statute.
Okay, I just look at things like family observances of religious holidays. I would like to believe that for the next million years, we will have school leaders that recognize every religious holiday, but that a student act. But what if we don't, right? Or what if we have a superintendent that doesn't care about hazing, harassment, and bullying? Theoretically, they would never get hired if they didn't care about that. But it's possible that we're gonna have completely different results by completely different.
I think that's why it's a group effort to come up with the model policy and procedures.
And they'll be reviewed
Every 3
every
years.
3 years, at least every 3 years.
And also, I still think we should get.
And also in our list, we always have the lovely last thing in the list, always, any other reason deemed, blah, blah, blah. So they still have that decision-making authority, whether there's a list there or not, when the list includes that. But I'll say my gut feeling is without, instant feeling is to concur. I mean, the findings, the legislative intent that were added seem reasonable. Us adding some other individuals to the model policy that like social workers seems reasonable to me. So
We'll get.
that's my gut feeling. I may change my mind.
I'll seek feedback. I don't know if it has to be formal testimony, but from AOE on the changes. I don't like to say this, but that, because I'm not a list fan, I'm actually,
Yeah.
I kind of like this change to
Yeah.
make it not the legislators coming up with the list, but the people who actually have to be involved in this decision making,
The experts in the field, the people.
dealing with that issue as part of the policy. That's me.
I'm good with it.
All right. Well, this has been very helpful. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
What's next, everybody? We have, yep, we're gonna have, the AOE comes in at 10. Just to talk about the issue that I brought up yesterday about funding. How we deal with, I don't know if I brought it up with all of you or not. I think we talked about it. We did. Anyway, we'll get their legal feedback on that as well. I'm not sure it's needed at this point because we've kind of just moved everything. I think we've sort of reached a consensus that we're not going to try to solve this in the last waning days of the session, and that we need to get the AOE to dive into it and provide recommendations. We can get a little more insight into that at 10 with AOE. The other thing just to discuss as scheduling for next week, this is really for you, Leanne. We have not booked anything for Wednesday or Thursday morning in preparation of potentially having a field trip to Hazen. Would you like to follow up with the folks up there and see if either of those mornings would work?
Wednesday or Thursday, yes, I can do that.
And if it doesn't, that's fine too, but that's sort of where we've got some time that we could book. And it would be really, a general, kind of a general, hey, here's Hazen, here how Hazen operates, here's what's great about Hazen. But also, if we get some people there to speak to the community schools model, what that looks like
Yeah,
in the building. Or just in talking to people.
yeah.
Does that sound positive to folks?
And you think we'd be there from like noon to,
Yeah.
9 to noon?
Yeah, 9 to 11
Okay.
or something, yeah, just a couple hours, would be fine. Pretty much change.
30 to 11:30 or 10 to noon. What if we,
I think we're in there.
Yeah.
9:30 to 11:30
Ish.
ish.
what
It's
works
about
for
40
them?
minutes from here.
All right,